Councillor Shiner.
Mr. Chairman, we've got 25 speakers at least, and we break at 12:30. At 1:30 we go on with some other items, which means that if the speakers don't get in before we break for lunch, they could be waiting till 3 or 4 o'clock. I would suggest to the committee that we vary the procedure and have 4 minutes for the speakers, and I believe then in the next 2 hours we can have everybody in. Otherwise, some people may be waiting till 3 or 4 o'clock. So my motion is to vary the procedure and have people speak for 4 minutes instead of 5. I leave it to the committee to decide.
So, okay, well, that motion is before us. I mean, I know that there's some people here who've never been here before, and they've actually timed their remarks for exactly 5 minutes. They've actually practiced. And so I just leave that to members of the committee to deliberate on. I'd like to have this move along as efficiently as possible. I understand what you're saying. I mean, none of... Okay. All those in favor of... So, all those in favor of Councillor Shiner's motion? Opposed? That loses. But we understand what you're trying... We appreciate the intent of what you're trying to do. Okay. So, I'll call out the first few deputies. Hamish Wilson, Izzy Chakowitz, Dave Meslin, and I apologize for any pronunciation of a name I make today that's inaccurate. Sita Ramkala Singh. Oh, Councillor Perks got it probably better than I did. Anyway, those are the first 4 speakers.
Mr. Chairman, could you just reset the clock and point out to people where the clock is? Because I just want to... They can see as well. Okay,
so that's a good advice. If you want to see where you are, Mr. Wilson probably knows well where the clocks are and knows the rules pretty well as in addition to that. So, but thank you for that direction. Mr. Wilson, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you for being here. I doubt that you've had a chance to go through my email because it was a little bit late, and of course it's on the longer side, but hopefully you will have some time before you actually make some choices. A lot of questions here, ranging from process, how we actually deal with the separated lanes, and of course Bloor Danforth, that's near dear, and it should be done. Within the context and the process, there hasn't been enough time to actually look at all of this report, and I'm upset that there's an attempt to put our time down to 4 minutes, sir. The report should be broken up. There's so much within all of this. You're moving ahead without any cycling committee input. I think that's a travesty. We need a cycling committee, and more especially we need a network subcommittee to actually filter through and debate these things ahead of taking your time. I'm very perturbed about what might happen with this Toronto bike plan if you support the Ford bike plan. Does supporting the Ford bike plan mean that we get rid of the Toronto bike plan? Even though it's tepid and inadequate and delayed, I'm very perturbed that by putting all the pathways in parks and the money in the parks, it will supplant things and will disserve urban cyclists. I'm very perturbed at the slowness of all of this as well. Just to read from the bike plan from 10 years ago, the Toronto Bike Plan proposal to include two-way bike lanes on Adelaide and or Richmond streets is one example of an innovative design solution. So 10 years later, maybe we'll actually get this underway. Even though if you do the bike plan and if you do the what's in here and the Bloor Danforth, you'll still have a huge amount of liability throughout the city because the public highways everywhere where cyclists travel and have a right to travel, we are traffic, they are in really rough shape for the most part. Full of potholes, speeding cars, and not enough room. So you have, regardless of what you do, you have a huge liability in my view for all sorts of other things. We need discussion about where the separated lanes are to go. I found it very interesting that only about 50% of what was proposed for the separated lane network has actually made it through. And why do we not, for instance, have College Street separated lanes proposed from Bay over to Spadina instead of, say, the viaduct, which I think is less useful. With Bloor Danforth, We absolutely have to do this EA. It's been long overdue. The planning precedents for actually having a Bloor-Danforth bikeway go back 20 years. It's ridiculous not to actually proceed with it. It was the #1 best spot in 1992 for an east-west bikeway. And hello, we've had 4 deaths in the core section of Bloor, from Church Street over to Dufferin, I believe, over that intervening 20 years. And for a mere $200,000, we could repaint that segment. And you're planning on spending $210,000 perhaps on removing bike lanes in Scarborough. What is a cyclist's life worth? It's just appalling that we can't actually have something direct, simple, and straightforward, because that's exactly what Bloor is. It's ideal for a bikeway because it's long, direct, flat, and without the streetcar tracks that inhibit doing anything else. You might see up on the bike plan that there's this gaping hole in the west end, and we can't actually do much about these things because of the streetcar tracks and repainting the other arterial streets that have the streetcar tracks. So Bloor's been logical for a decade or so, and how much more danger, harm, and death do you actually wish to support? Because if you are going to support this Ford bike scheme and put away the Bloor-Danforth, I think you're supporting more harm and death, crash, and collision of cyclists and cyclists with pedestrians on a very obvious corridor. So you have, and it's not about money. There's tons of money. You should actually reduce the amount of money supporting the Ford bike plan to put paths in parks where many of us aren't. That's up to, I think, $50 million over 4 years. Let's change that from 100 kilometers to 35 kilometers. And that would actually free up tens of millions of dollars, and we could do the Bloor-Danforth. We have had 5,800 names on a petition to support the Bloor-Danforth bikeway that I had asked the clerk to actually bring up to this committee, and unfortunately doesn't seem to have been done. The parking is a non-issue. There's far more parking on top of the subway than that would have to be removed from the street. The subway would benefit. There are a huge number of captive riders on the subway that would actually, I think, prefer to bike, so we could expand the subway for the price of paint. That's absolutely dirt cheap capacity. 500,000 for a study and 500,000 to actually repaint Bloor-Danforth along the length of the subway. That's like just half of the fares that the 500,000 riders actually pay.
Mr. Wilson?
Thank you.
Any questions of the deputy? Mr. Wilson, I had one question for you. If you were doing a east-west corridor in the north part of the downtown, and you were choosing between Wellesley and College, because you mentioned College Street as well, in, let's say, 30 seconds, could you, because there was a lot in that presentation, could you, and you could probably wax poetic probably for half an hour about this because you know so much about this, could you tell me which you would choose and why?
Well, again, it's a problem of context in that sometimes the road width varies. Wellesley, for instance, is narrower than College, and then even within that narrow Wellesley limit, it varies in width. So I would as you head east to eastwards towards Parliament to get up to Wellesley. Because you know the Danforth and the viaduct is the logical conduit and is a proven conduit and bike lane network. So Wellesley towards the east and then College towards the center. Thank you.